Hello, my gorgeous friends of Webflow. I'm Francesco, and if you don't know him well, in this channel we do Webflow things, and we make them simple and accessible to everybody, from time to time by using a whiteboard. But not today, because today we are going to talk about my personal approach to Webflow animations and interactions. And by the way, you'll find the link to the content I'm about to show you in the description down below. So without further ado, let's just jump right into Webflow. Hello everybody. So this is my personal recipe when dealing with Webflow animations, especially if I want to build interactions like hover over out a button, open a pop-up, close a pop-up, and I really want to make sure that the amount of debugging that is needed is reduced as much as possible. Now, to show you how all these ingredients here work together, I prepared a couple of very easy examples. The first one is a hover interaction. I just want to hover over this button and make this image fade in. Then when hovering out of the button, I want this image to fade out. Now, I've just built the fading animation for this interaction, which is this one. Now, if we open the animation, we can see that we are just playing a bit with the move transform. We are moving the image upward, and we are also playing a bit with the scale transform, with the opacity, of course, because we want the image to fade in. And then with a bit of delay here, we are also playing with the blur filter. Nothing crazy. Now, what I want to do is I want to reverse this fading animation to build a fade out animation for this interaction. And this takes us to step one. If you want to reverse an animation, duplicate it. Now, why is this a good practice? Because we have already set up, in this case, the fade in animation for the hover interaction that we want to build. So we know that it works. We know that it contains all the elements that are involved in this interaction. So if we want to make sure that we won't miss anything inside the fade out animation, inside the reversed animation, let's just start from what we have. Let's just duplicate the animation that we have already built. So let's do that. Let's pick the fade animation here, 3 dots. Let's duplicate it. Let's rename the new animation and we can call it fade out. Now, let's open this animation here. And what we have to do now, we have just to revert all the values. And I know that probably some of you have already started thinking, this is not going to work no matter what. And yes, yeah, that's true. But we are going step by step, so please bear with me. Right now, I just want to revert all the values inside the animation. So in the fade-in animation, we started from a value for the move transform of 3 rem along the y-axis. Because, yeah, we wanted to move the image upward. Now, we have to start from 0 because we want to move the image back downward. And then, here, we have to go to 3. Then, for the filter, we were starting from 5. Let's start from 0. And then, we go to 5. Same thing with the scale transform. We were starting from 1.05. So let's start from 0 and let's go to 1.05. And with opacity, we have to start from 100% and then we have to go to 0 because, of course, we want to fade the image out. Let's hit save. Let's go to preview mode and yeah, something weird is happening because the image is already there, but as if we were already hovering over the button, but of course we aren't. Now, if we hover over the button, nothing happens. If we hover out of the button, the image fades out. We hover over the button, the image fades in, then it fades out. So it seems that everything is working fine except for the initial state of the interaction. And this takes us to step 2, which is make sure you only have a single group of initial conditions for each pair of interactions. But what does it mean? In Webflow, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the order in which the animations are listed in the interactions panel does matter. And if we want to avoid conflicts between different groups of initial conditions, one thing we can do is making sure that for each pair of animations, in this case, the fade in and the fade out animations, we only keep one group of initial conditions. But again, what does it mean? Let's take a look at the interactions panel here, at this list of animations. Of course, these two lists are exactly the same, so let's stick with the first one. We define the fade-in animation, and the fade-in animation, of course, has its initial conditions. For example, one thing that is easy to notice is the opacity, the value of the opacity. We want to fade the image in, so the initial state for the opacity in the fade-in animation is 0. But after the fade-in animation, we defined the fade-out animation. And the fade out animation also has its own initial conditions. And for the opacity, the initial condition was opacity at 100% because we want to fade the animation out. So we want to start from 100% and then go to 0. But because the order in which the animations are listed in the interactions panel does matter in Webflow, and because both the fade in and the fade out animation have their own initial conditions, the initial conditions of the fade out animation are overriding the initial conditions of the fade in animation, because again, the fade out animation has been defined after the fade in animation. So how can we deal with this? Well, again, we can just make sure that for each pair of animations, we only keep one group of initial conditions. And in this case, the logical answer would be, let's just keep the initial conditions associated with the fade in animation, because this is our starting point. We just want to be able to start from a situation where the image is not there. Then when we hover over the bottom, the image fades in, we hover out, the image fades out. So let's do that. Let's just open the fade out animation. Let's select all the initial state for the fade out animation and let's just delete them. Then let's hit save. Then let's go to preview mode and the image isn't there anymore. We hover over the bottom, the image fades in. We hover out of the bottom, the image fades out. Hover in, hover out, and everything seems to be working just fine. But if we take a closer look at the fade out animation, we can notice that we have just reverted the values, but we actually didn't revert the animation because right now we are anyway starting from the move, the scale, and the opacity. And then with a bit of delay, we are also targeting the blur filter. But this is exactly what we were doing inside the fade-in animation. To actually revert the fade-in animation, we don't just have to revert the values. We also need to revert the steps inside the animation, which means that we need to have this filter action here as the very first one in that list. And then with this exact value for the delay, we want to target all the other properties: move, scale, transform, and the opacity. And this takes us to step 3. So step 3, when building a reversed animation, start from the bottom. But again, why is this a good practice? Well, because if we are going to reverse an animation, the very last step, the step at the bottom, the last action in the first state animation, in this case the fade-in animation, will be the very first step, so the step at the top in the reversed animation, in our case the fade-out animation. And this will allow us to have a clear reference to build the rest of the reversed animation. So how can we apply this concept here? In this situation, we just have to select the very last step here in the fade out animation, because again, we only reverted the values, but not the actions. And because this filter action was the very last action in the fade in animation, we have to bring it at the top of this action list, because this will be our very first step in the fade out animation. So let's just drag and drop it at the very top. And then remember, we said that we want to use this delay in the fade out animation not on the filter action, but on all the other actions, because again, we want to revert the list of actions that we created for the fade in animation. So we have to remove the delay from here, so the delay will be 0 on the filter action, and we need to assign this delay to all these other steps. But we first need to drag them onto the filter action, because this was the structure that we gave to the fade-in animation. And then to these 3 steps, we can apply the 0.2 seconds delay. And that's it. We can hit save. We can go to preview mode. Probably the difference will be barely visible, but right now we have really built the reversed version of the fade-in animation, which is our fade-out animation. We hover over, we hover out. So right now we are first acting on the blur filter, and then after 0.2 seconds we are targeting all the other properties. And now what we are going to do is we are going to merge step 1 to 3. In the second example, which is a open pop-up, close pop-up interaction, and this will also allow us to see the fourth step in action. Always check the elements you are targeting. But again, let's go step by step. Once again, I only have the animation for the first state of the interaction, in this case the open pop-up state. So we have the open pop-up animation here, which is this one. Yes, the animation is ugly and the design is probably even worse, but they both serve the purpose, so yeah, let's stick with them. Let's open this animation here, and we can see that we are simply starting from a state where the pop-up is not visible, of course, so we are playing with the display property. The opacity, we want to start with the opacity of the pop-up being 0. Then we are also playing with the move transform. We are moving the pop-up upward. We are also rotating it a little bit, and we are changing the background color of the pop-up. And we are doing all of that with some delays, a couple of delays here. The first one of 0.1 seconds for the move and rotate transform. And the second one of 0.6 seconds for to change the background color. So now let's try to follow step 1 to 3, and then when inspecting the result, we will talk about step 4. So first, here under the second click drop down, let's select start an animation. Let's duplicate the open pop-up animation here, and let's rename it. This will be pop-up close. So as we said, first thing, let's just, after duplicating the open pop-up animation, let's just revert the values here. So we want to start from, let's see here, from a display property of flex. Then the opacity needs to be 100% at the very beginning. Move transform, here we have 10. This needs to be 0 because when we close the pop-up, we want to bring it back down. Rotate, this was 10, it needs to be 0. The background color, instead of this white here, we want to start from pink. And then this needs to be hidden. Then the opacity needs to be 0. Move transform, this needs to be 10. Again, we are reverting all the values. This again needs to be 10, and the background color back to white. Of course, as soon as you get used to these steps, you can definitely skip the reverting part for the initial states, because right now we are going to delete them, because once again we don't want any conflicts between initial conditions. So let's delete these states here. And then we said we have to start from the bottom. So this one will be our first step in the close pop-up animation. So let's bring it to the top. Now here things are a bit tricky, because let's just go back for a moment. Here we are using a delay of 0.6 seconds. Here a delay of 0.1, and all these actions are grouped together. So to revert this animation here, we need to know what delay to apply to these two steps, to the move and rotate transform steps. We need, of course, to consider the difference between the delay that is applied here, so 0.6 seconds, and the delay that is applied here, which is 0.1 seconds. This means that these two steps in the close pop-up animation will happen 0.5 seconds after this one, because 0.5 seconds is equal to 0.6 seconds minus 0.1 seconds. So we have to keep this in mind. Now we can bring this up. This will have a delay of 0 again. Then these two steps, we can bring them onto the pop-up background color action. And now we have to apply that 0.5 second delay. Then this one. We had a delay between these two actions and this one of 0.1 seconds. So if we bring this opacity action onto the move and rotate transform steps, we have to increase this delay by 0.1. So this means that the delay associated with the opacity step will be 0.6. And finally, after that, we have the hide show step that just makes the pop-up invisible, hidden. We can hit save. We can go to preview mode. Let's go down to display the open pop-up button here. We open the pop-up. Okay. Now we close the pop-up, and things are not working as expected. Because what did we forget? This is something that happens to me very often. We assigned the close pop-up animation to the open pop-up button, but we don't want this. We really want to assign the close pop-up animation to the close pop-up button. And so first, let's do that. So here, we can simply, after selecting the open pop-up button, click on select an action to get rid of the animation that we applied. Then we can open here the pop-up content wrapper, select the pop-up close button, and here we have to assign the close pop-up animation. Now let's go back to preview mode. Let's open the pop-up, let's close the pop-up, and anyway, things are not working as expected. And this is what will take us to step 4, because it seems that the pop-up is just not fitting out. What is happening here? Let's open the close pop-up animation that we have just applied to the close pop-up button. And let's try to see what are the elements we are targeting. Because another thing that we always have to remember is that we always have to check the elements that we are targeting inside an animation. And we have to do this for each and every action inside the animation, because we really want to make sure that we are targeting the right elements here. And so let's try to go step by step here inside this close pop-up animation. We start from the pop-up background color action. We are targeting all elements with this class. So yeah, no matter the element we are assigning the close pop-up animation to, this will be fine in this case, because we are targeting, again, all elements with this class. Okay. Pop-up move, all elements with this class. Pop-up rotate, all elements with this class. Pop-up wrapper. Now it says only siblings with this class. Why it says only siblings with this class? Because we built this animation starting from the open pop-up button. And if we see here inside the navigator, the pop-up wrapper is a sibling of the main CTA button that we are using to open the pop-up. They are both direct children of this list item. That's why here inside the animation, we can see that the pop-up wrapper we are targeting, the sibling of the open pop-up button that has this class applied. But this doesn't hold true for the close pop-up button, because the close pop-up button is here and it's actually a children of the pop-up wrapper. So because the close pop-up button is a children of the pop-up wrapper here, we need to change this value, and in this case we can select only parents with this class, because this works for both a direct parent or an ancestor of that element. And we can clearly see that the pop-up wrapper is an ancestor of the close pop-up button. And once again here, pop-up wrapper hides show. Okay, Webflow changed this value automatically because we have already done this once for this step of the animation. So we are fine in this case, but always check the value for each and every step inside the animation, because from time to time, yeah, this doesn't happen. Webflow doesn't change the values automatically, not always. Now we can hit save. We can go to preview mode. Once again, let's display the open pop-up button. We open the pop-up, we close the pop-up, and everything seems to be working fine. Yeah, we can select what's on the page, so it means that, yeah, the pop-up is not there anymore. We not only set its opacity to 0, but we also managed to hide it completely from the page. And that's it, my very personal recipe to deal with Webflow animations and reduce the need for debugging as much as possible. Thanks so much everybody for watching this video, and if you liked it, well, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or want to share thoughts about things I might improve, well, feel absolutely free to throw a comment down below. And before I forget, my recommendation today is a song by Yama, and the song is called Shikisai. So, see you next time. Ja!